Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to make a card with some elements, ink blending, and some easy foiling. Hope you enjoy. So I started this card by blending some Lime Punch Elements ink into the middle of my card base. And I knew that I wanted to work from the lightest color to the darkest color. So the lightest color will be on the inside, and then it will get gradually darker going outwards. So to get a really good blend with these inks, I'm starting off of the paper on my craft mat and then gradually adding the ink on. I'm also using the domed blending tools from Ranger, and I prefer to use these for my Elements ink as well as my Distress inks. So now I'm using some pine ink and I'm blending this on the outside of the Lime Punch and leaving a bit of a gap between the pine and the corner of the paper. And I started with a really light pressure and then I gradually added a bit more until it was as dark as I wanted. And I'm just going to repeat this on the other side so I have a nice symmetrical design. Now you might notice that I tend to tap off my blending tool before I add it onto the paper, and that just helps to get the ink to settle, and it makes sure that I don't add too much ink in one area. So once I'm happy with that pine color, I'm going to go back and add more of that Lime Punch and then blend these two colors together. And that will also help to brighten up the middle part of this background. Now to make the background a bit more dramatic, I'm going to blend some Merlot ink, which I know doesn't necessarily match, but as you can see, it still blends really nicely into that pine and Lime Punch color. And I think it creates a bit of a dramatic statement on the background. So I just started off with a really light coverage, and then I'm adding more ink until I'm happy with the amount of that Merlot ink. And I'm just going to focus this ink onto the edges and the top right and bottom left corners. And it's nice and dark right on the corners, and then gradually it fades out into that pine ink. And I'll repeat that on the other corner as well. One of the things that I love about these Elements inks is that they are easy to blend together. So even two colors like these, which you necessarily wouldn't think go well together, you can blend them together and create a stunning background. So I'm just going to go back and add a bit more of that pine color and blend in between where the pine meets the Merlot. And I'll do this on both edges until I'm happy with the results. And I just love how dramatic this background is. Now once I'm happy with the blend on this background, I will set it aside to dry for a few minutes before moving on to the next step. So I'm going to be stamping with Athena, and I've just put her on one of my my cutting plates for my die cutting machine because it's nice and big, but I'm going to stamp her in some VersaFine ink. This is the Nocturne, and I'll just put her in the middle of the background here. And the great thing about using the cutting pad is that you can lift it up on the edges to make sure that your stamp has a good contact with all the different areas. And it's handy when you can't find the right acrylic block. So now I'm going to stamp the mini fish right beside Athena, and I'll use that Nocturne ink again. Sorry for the glare there on my acrylic block. And now I'm going to take my leaf trail stencil. This is from Lavinia Stamps as well. And I'm going to lightly tape it with some washi tape onto the back of my paper so it doesn't move. and then I'll just tape it temporarily onto my desk. And instead of adding ink, I'm just going to use a baby wipe and gently tap it around the edges so that I have the negative effect of the stencil showing through. So this will react with the ink and lift up some of the color around the edges. And I'm just tapping it to have a nice contact, and I'll just check to make sure it's working. Perfect. And then I'll continue with the other corner as well. So this technique works best when you've applied a darker ink as your background, and of course when your ink will react with water, like this Elements ink does. So I'm just focusing, like I said, on the edges, right where the pine and the Merlot ink are. And when I lift the stencil off, you can see that gives a beautiful light effect on the background. And then I'll just carefully remove that washi tape, being careful not to tear it, especially if the paper is a little bit wet from that baby wipe. And you can see the beautiful effect that I have there. And it will get more dramatic as it dries. So I'm just going to add some sparkle detail, and I'm using the Spectrum Noir sparkle pen, but I'm watering it down with some water so that I don't get such a concentrated form of sparkle. And I added this around the mermaid's scales, her tail, and also a little bit on her wings. Now using the same pen, I'm just going to squeeze it onto my craft mat, and then I can apply some concentrated areas of that sparkle pen. So I've just made some bubbles for the mermaid and the fish. And then I'm also going to fill in her tail a little bit there. And then also add some scales that are a little bit more sparkly. And you can see the difference from the sparkle that we added before and the concentrated version. So if you have one of these pens, you can always thin it down a little bit with water like I did here. So I've just added a few darker scales and some detail on her wings as well. And then I decided that these were a bit too dark, so I just went back in with a little bit of water on a paper towel, and this helped to soften that sparkle. And I'll just continue to do that until I'm happy with the amount of sparkle on the mermaid. Now to add a bit more detail, I'm just going to outline both of the stamps with a white gel pen. And then I'll color in her hair with a Copic marker. This is the Y15. And don't worry, we'll add some sparkle to this as well. So on top of the Copic marker, I just added some sparkle highlights with this silver sparkle pen. And it looks gorgeous in real life, all these different types of sparkle, just perfect for this mermaid card. Now I thought it would be fun to highlight some of the mermaid's scales. So I used some Transfer Gel Duo. This is from Deco Foil. And I used my die pick so that I could put very small amounts of this transfer gel onto some of the areas of the mermaid. And I know these are hard to see in the video, but I'm just adding them to random scales. And as you put it on, it will be white, but once this is completely dry, it will go clear and it will be sticky to the touch. And that's what allows the foil to stick in place. So I'm also going to add some onto the mermaid's tail. I'm just going to follow the direction of the stamp and have them going around the shape of the tail. And I think the trick with this foil is just to add little highlights and not too much of it. And so using this die pick is a great way to have little concentrated areas of it. And I'll just put a little bit more on her wings as well. Now this will take at least an hour to dry completely. And once it's dry, as I said, it will be clear, but sticky to the touch. And I'm just going to use some of the purple foil and place it shiny side up, and then run it through my die cutting machine with just the normal cutting sandwich. So I have a chrome base plate and then a top plate. And I ran it through twice, and this pushes the foil onto the Deco foil transfer gel, which is sticky. And then you can gently peel off the foil, and it leaves those areas where you put the transfer gel nice and sparkly. And that leftover foil I will keep for another project. So now I'm just going to add this to my card base, and I trimmed down the edges very slightly so I would have a tiny white border around my card, which is now 5 by 7. And then for a sentiment, I'm going to put it on the inside of my card, and I'm going to use the Water Spirit verse from Lavinia Stamps. And I'll put this in Nocturne. And then to tie it into the front of the card, I'm going to add one of the mini fish beside the sentiment as well. Just perfect. And now you can see the finished card with that foiling detail. Perfect for the mermaid. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!